Plus, we will also take a look at some of the keys to the game that you need to know. Before we get into that, as always, you know the drill. We want to hear from you. If you're over on Facebook, leave us a question down in the chat. Pete and I want to hear from you. We'll get to some of your thoughts toward the end of our conversation today. Packers fans, NFL fans, you have been waiting for 13 years, a matchup between quarterback Aaron Rodgers and quarterback Tom Brady. No, they won't be actually physically on the field at the same time. However, they will be leading two stellar offenses up against two very talented defenses. The Packers had the #1 scoring offense during the regular season. However, when they went up against the Buccaneers in Week 6, they fell flat. They were only able to score 10 points all day. How can quarterback Aaron Rodgers lead the offense to have a much stronger game this time around?
I mean, the odds alone just tell you that what happened in that game, the chances are minimal that we'll have a repeat. He went into that game with 2 pick sixes in his career. He threw 1 pick six and had another that was returned to the 2, so it might as well have been a pick six. So that alone, I mean, chances are something like that's not going to happen. So that alone should make this, you would think would make this a different game.
The Packers are expecting nose tackle Vita Vea to be active for the first time since Week 5. Vea has been on injured reserve dealing with a hurt ankle. He was activated just this week and is available to play in today's game. Head coach Matt LaFleur said that Vea was having one of the best seasons of his career leading up to his injury. He had 2 sacks, 3 quarterback hits, and 10 tackles in just 5 games. How are the Packers' run game going to have to take in Vea into account?
Well, it could be tougher. You know, he's a big, talented guy. He's one of those big, huge guys who's also pretty athletic, so they're rare. Now, he's been out for a long time, for, 3 months. Does that add up to 3 months? Somewhere in that vicinity, right? So you never know. Maybe he won't be very sharp. But he is a big, talented player, and running, because one of the things they might want to do is run at those inside linebackers some. But with Vita Vea and Ndamukong Suh in the middle, that gets a little tougher to move those guys.
Just a quick update, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers just posted their injury report, their inactive report, and Vea is in fact active, so they will have to keep in mind as we watch the Packers attack the run game for a second straight time against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We'll get to the rest of the injury report in just a moment. Let's talk about the Packers injury report very quickly. Cornerback Kevin King had been dealing with some different injuries this season, and now he is dealing with yet another injury. He was not practicing on Friday with a back issue. However, he is active for today's game, so he is healthy and will presumably start. The Packers have been mostly healthy throughout the season and into the postseason, so that's good news that they'll have King going up against 2 of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL and Buccaneers wide receivers Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Antonio Brown is inactive today. How are the Packers going to use King and other starter Jair Alexander to try and neutralize those talented wide receivers?
The King injury is interesting. I mean, he's had a tough season. He's had a tough career. He's hurt a lot. Tramon Williams has to be ready to go, right? He's going to be the next man up. Josh Jackson, as you said, is inactive, so he's going to have to be ready to play. Brady's not the deep thrower he was. Pettin plays a lot of zone. I'll be curious to see if Pettin does anything to get more pressure up the middle, maybe blitzing the inside linebackers a little more. But I guess, keeping an eye on King, because teams have been staying away from Jair Alexander. So King is who they're going to go after, and we'll see how he holds up with the injury.
Speaking of quarterback Tom Brady, going back to that Week 6 matchup, Brady didn't have the most stellar game of his career. He had 17 completions for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns. However, the Packers really struggled in getting after Brady and putting some pressure on him. Brady wasn't hurried once in the pocket. How can the Packers pass rush up the ante a little bit more in today's game?
Yeah, I mean, I think they just have to hope and think that they're a better rushing team than they were then. Zadarius Smith got off to a slow start. Preston Smith really didn't play, just played only okay for most of the season until they didn't start him that game a few weeks ago, and then he's played a lot better since. I don't know, you got to be careful blitzing this guy because he can read them, but pressure does bother him more, and I think that happens when these guys get older. The pressure bothers them even more. So I do wonder, like I said earlier, if we'll see some more inside blitzes. I rewatched the game earlier this week, and the only time they got to him was Rashawn Gary got to him, but it was like he got a call for a face mask penalty, so it didn't do any good. If their pass rush is the same today as it was in that game, you know, they're going to be in trouble.
Well, let's take a look at this Tampa Bay Buccaneers inactives list. Some big news, so let's just start with the big one. Safety Antoine Winfield Jr., their starter, is inactive today. So that is really big, Pete. How are the Packers going to try to exploit that matchup in the Tampa Bay Buccaneers secondary?
Well, it's a talented young guy who's in the running for Defensive Rookie of the Year. He's a good all-around player. It seems like he's pretty decent in coverage. Definitely is a good tackler and good up in the box. So it's just you're taking a quality player off the field for that defense. So I think that's a huge help for the Packers.
That's the most notable inactive on the Buccaneers side. Let's take a look at the Packers inactives. Quarterback Jordan Love, as per usual. Cornerback Kadar Holman. Safety Vernon Scott. Cornerback Josh Jackson. Outside linebacker Jonathan Garvin. Tight end Jay Sternberger. And defensive lineman Kingsley Kiki. Even though King didn't practice this week or on Friday, he's active today, and clearly cornerback Tramon Williams is the preferred next man up over Josh Jackson.
Yeah, amazing. You know, the guy hasn't been here all year, but he could do it. I mean, he played for Pettin in Cleveland. He played for Pettin 2 years here, so knowing the defense isn't going to be an issue. It tells you, one, how far Josh Jackson hasn't come. You know, early, like at camp, I thought maybe he was going to be he'd contribute more this year. Hasn't happened, and it just tells you a lot that they think a guy they could bring in from another team after the season's over is better than what they had on hand. But obviously, they think that with Tramon Williams.
Let's take some questions over on Facebook right now. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We appreciate it. Let's start with our friend Levi on Facebook. Levi asks if defensive coordinator Mike Pettin would put Kevin King on Mike Evans with help and then have Jair Alexander try to take Brady's quick read away from Chris Godwin. How do you think Mike Pettin is going to match up his cornerbacks with those wide receivers?
You know, that's a really good question, and I was thinking about this week because there's always a couple ways you can do it. One is what he suggests there, where you put your number 2 guy on him and always give him help, and then you put your number 1 guy on another good receiver and take that guy out of the game. And King should be a decent matchup for Evans as far as the size goes, at least. Evans is a 6'5" guy, so you know that would help a lot. But I haven't noticed them matching up King with taller receivers over the last couple of years. When they do match, it's putting Alexander on the guy because he's their best guy. And maybe they'll just go by sides. You never know what their game plan is, what they want to take away. So we'll find out. I don't really have a good guess for you because they could go either way.
Something to keep an eye on the Buccaneers' first possession of the game. Thanks so much, Levi, for your question. Let's take a question from our dear friend Eric over on Facebook. Eric wants to know if we anticipate the Buccaneers blitzing as much as they did in Week 6, the last time the two teams played. Quarterback Aaron Rodgers was brought down 4 times, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defensive coordinator Todd Bowles loves to blitz from all over the place. Yep. Cornerbacks, sending inside linebackers. What do you think the defensive game plan is going to be this time around?
I would think it'll be similar, except he'll have some different blitzes that they didn't show. That week I was talking with an assistant coach for another team, and he said what Bowles would do, because teams usually going into a game will go back about 4 games or so on the tape of whoever they're playing. And see, he said Bowles would go back to blitzes that he showed about 8 weeks ago, so that the Packers may not have studied those. So it'll probably be some different blitzes than he showed in that Packers game. But Devin White has 9.5 sacks, something like that. I would suspect we'll see a lot of him.
Speaking of the Buccaneers inside linebackers, let's take a question here from, I lost you, it's Eduardo. Eduardo wants to know, how do the Packers stop the Buccaneers linebackers from stopping the Packers run game? The Packers were limited to under 100 rushing yards the last time the two teams played. How can head coach Matt LaFleur utilize Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams, and A.J. Dillon better and pick up some more yardage on the ground today?
You know, it's funny, my assumption was you run at the smaller, faster guys. And I asked 2 offensive coaches in the league. Both were tight end, offensive line type coaches. And I said, so what do you do here? You run at them? And one of them said, yes, you run at them. And the other one said, no, you mix it up. You run outside a lot. You want them to run. But they both said you also want to use a lot of misdirection. So I wonder if we're going to see a little more of that, maybe some more of the jet sweeps and a lot of the fake jet sweeps just to make them hold their ground for that little extra half step.
Let's take a question now from Linda. Linda wants to know if the Packers will be able to stop tight end Rob Gronkowski. Gronkowski is a big body, and quarterback Tom Brady has a very deep connection with him going back to their time with the New England Patriots. How are the Packers going to attempt to use their safeties, their cornerbacks, to try and cover Gronkowski?
He had a decent game in the first matchup. He had 2 catches. One was like a 30-yarder, and one was a 13, and they were both at important times. Having watched a little bit of the Bucs for the last month or so, I mean, he's not the guy he used to be. He's just kind of a big lumbering guy out there now. So I'm not sure he's the big threat, but you get in the red zone, Brady still does trust him, so he'll probably throw to him. And, one of the best things to do is to hit those guys at the line of scrimmage. But we haven't seen Pettin doing a lot of that jamming.
Let's take a question from Sam over on Facebook. Sam wants to know if it's supposed to snow at Lambeau today, or has that already gone away? If you can tell, it is very slightly flurrying outside. The snow has slowed down considerably from this morning. It was coming down pretty hard, laying pretty well. However, it is supposed to stop by the time the game starts. How do you think the weather today will impact a team coming from Southern Florida?
Yeah, I'm sorry, a little earlier there I got distracted. This guy's walking around trying to sell a ticket. I thought you couldn't sell your tickets on these. I thought if you bought the ticket, you had to show up for the game.
Apparently not, or maybe.
So good luck there. And I'm sorry, what was the question?
Just wondering again? About the weather. The high today, I believe, is 28 degrees.
Doesn't it feel like almost exactly like it did last week? It does to me.
Almost identical.
I mean, there's no sun, same thing. It's not as warm as the numbers say, but it's still not bitter cold. The snow has basically stopped, and we're not supposed to get any more. So I'm not sure it's going to have that big an impact, except, the field will be slippery. Lambeau always is, and it's especially slippery when you get in the wintertime. And the Packers, as Davante Adams and other players have talked about, they know what cleats to wear. Yeah, this might be a little edge there for the Packers.
Let's take another question here from Levi. Levi says that this feels like a big Davante Adams game with the Buccaneers' stout run defense. The Buccaneers have the #1 rushing defense in the regular season. This past season, Davante Adams, as we all know, has been absolutely electric this season. During the regular season, he led all receivers in touchdowns with 18. How will Matt LaFleur try to use Davante Adams to the best of his ability if the Buccaneers are able to stop the run?
My guess is I'm thinking they're going to come out and throw early and then run instead of we're going to establish the run. I'm guessing they're going to do a lot of throwing early. That could mean a lot of early short passes to Adams.
Amy over on Facebook wants to know what the offensive line and the tight ends will do to protect Aaron Rodgers from being sacked. Aaron Rodgers took 4 sacks in their Week 6 matchup against the Packers. How can the offensive line and the tight ends do a little bit better blocking, do different things blocking this time around to keep him clean?
I would think they spent a lot of time. They had trouble with some of the blitzes and stunts. I would think they spent a lot of time working on how they're going to handle all those on the pass-offs when there's stunts and who picks up who with their blitz calls. I would bet there was a lot of time spent in the classroom and on the field working on all the different blitzes that they might see from Todd Bowles.
Alex over on Facebook asserts that Equinemius St. Brown, the wide receiver, will make big plays from time to time when it should be done on a consistent basis, and wide receiver Marquez Valdes-Scantling is a deep threat. They've been able to contribute periodically throughout the season, including this past week's divisional round game against the Los Angeles Rams. How likely is it that LaFleur is able to get St. Brown and Valdes-Scantling involved in today's game?
St. Brown sees a decent number of snaps, all things considered, and it seems kind of a game-to-game thing with whether Valdes-Scantling makes the play or not. He might go 2 or 3 games without doing much of anything, catching a couple passes, and then all of a sudden he'll hit you for two deep balls, which he may catch. He might even catch both of them. And so it's a lot of it just seems to be game dependent, matchup dependent, and so predicting who's going to have the big day has been a challenge with this team, other than Davante Adams, and I guess Tanyan you can assume will make a couple plays. And with the rest of these receivers, It's kind of it changes week to week. Lazard is the most consistent of them.
Let's go over to Jim on Facebook. Jim wants to know how many Packers fans are allowed in Lambeau today. Is it going to be loud for the opposition? Today, the Packers are allowing the same number of fans that they had in the stadium last time, which was a little bit over 8,000. And those fans were really loud last week. They were handing out signs, plastic signs to all of the fans. They were banging them all on the metal bleachers, making a lot of noise. How loud do you anticipate Lambeau Field being today?
It was very loud last week, and it'll be just as loud this week. A little tidbit for everybody who's joining us today. On Friday, one of those coaches I was talking to said that even when you have these smaller crowds, you can still pipe in the crowd noise, which I didn't know. I confirmed that with the Packers. So maybe that's one of the reasons why it was so loud last week is, besides the noise that the people are making, and they're all spread out throughout the stadium, I think that helps. But being able to pipe in that 85 decibel, 90 decibel, whatever it is, that adds a little bit to it too.
It was loud. Perhaps I should have brought my earplugs this week so I could focus a little bit more on the game and less on all the noise going around, but I'll just have to stay really focused. It'll be a little bit of a challenge once again for this week. That is going to do it for us today, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I will be live after the game with Ryan Wood over on Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube once again, so make sure you come back here to chat with us. Bring your questions, bring your post-game beverages, whatever you would like to do. We will meet you there. Enjoy the game. For Pete Dougherty, I am Olivia Reiner. We will see you next time.